Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, we'll talk to Brent Forrest, a very active member of the Chesterton Society for many years. He served on our board and is the latest recipient of the Chesterton Society Lifetime Service Award. All that coming up soon on Uncommon Sense. Welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. As mentioned before, today we have Brent Forrest on the show. Brent, how are you?
Hello, Grettelyn. I'm doing well down here in sunny Vero Beach, Florida.
Ooh, sounds nice. I'm joined also with my co-host, Albert Sines.
Hello.
Today we're excited to talk to Brent. Brent is an adult convert to the Catholic Church. He is, as I said, active on our board in the Chesterton Society, or he was on the board. He's an active member of our society, and he's been involved with G.K. Chesterton, and Chesterton has been involved with him for many, many years. Do you want to tell us, Brent, how you first met G.K. Chesterton?
Oh, yes, and it was a long time ago, but it took me years for it to catch up with me. To put this in context, I'm an adult convert from 10 years ago. I just celebrated, Easter was the 10th anniversary of my baptism into the church. And
Congratulations.
And I hate to confess, but I was 59 years old at the time. It took me that long to discover the church. And like many people, like many adult converts, I was one who would have said, become a Catholic? Are you kidding? That's never going to happen. It just wasn't even remotely in my plans. And so becoming a Catholic was the greatest surprise and probably the greatest gift that God could have given me. And it does that for many people. It's a marvelous thing to be surprised. I like to tell a lot of young people in business, I said, they tell you it all to set these goals, but the greatest gifts and greatest joys you're going to find in life are things you cannot set as a goal. Put a picture of it on your refrigerator and say, I'm going to get that, I started reading. I was an avid reader in college and one of these self-help readers. I don't mean self-help books. I just read everything on a constant search for truth and wonderful things. And some years back, I got a book. There have been many of these, said 100 books everybody ought to read, kind of a great books list. And Chesterton was listed in there. I think it was The Man Who Was Thursday was listed as one of the great books that, the world's just never going to lose love of. So Chesterton's name stuck, and off and on, I ran across a few things he's quoted often, but as you know, he's one of the greatest writers and thinkers of the last century. And yet he's quoted a lot, but he's really not highly praised and highly visible in our academic culture. Anyway, sometime in my late 50s, I started reading him, and I read Orthodoxy. And it was an absolute revolution in my life, as many others have said. It's almost like saying, gee, I've been looking at this picture of the world for years and years and almost figuring it out, but I can't make the pieces fit. And all of a sudden I read Orthodoxy and the whole thing turns over. It's like it just turned upside right. and so he has a profound way of changing our view of the world.
Beautiful. Yeah. I definitely, I owe my reversion to Chesterton, and I think it's very interesting because, like you said, there's a certain sense that when you read his work, everything sort of falls into place. And he describes his own conversion in the same way, that when he found the church, everything that he thought should be true, was already in the church.
Yeah. It's a wholly different experience than you would expect. And once you get in there, there's not much going back once you've had that experience. One thing I would want to say, because we've talked about the main purpose of this podcast, and it's important to me for anybody listening, because there's so many ways we can invest our time. The one thing I would hope we can most get out of our discussion is for our listeners to know this thing. Most everyone I talk to that's a serious Catholic feels this overwhelming sense of darkness and dread in our outer world. It's not exactly a secret that we see we'd see trouble within and trouble without. And there are so many ways we ask, what can I do? How can I serve? How can I change? How can I vote? Who do I give money to? We can pray. We're always told, go into the closet and pray. But it does feel like we're in a battle for the culture, for the soul. And we're battling in particular for the souls of our children and grandchildren. And I know that there are many parents and grandparents who look and they are horrified because of the difficulties in the world. But what most troubles them, they'll look and they'll say, well, the church wanted me to join a quilting bee, and we've got a fundraiser for, returning some money to this kitty or repay back this debt or whatever. But I'm watching my grandchildren fall away from the faith. I almost feel like the old joke of changing the deck chairs around while the Titanic is sinking. And so what I do want to say, and not say it with heaviness, but with a certain amount of lightness and encouragement, is that one of the things I want to talk about is I have found in a way that's effective for many of us. We are asked to do things, give money to things, engage in things, and go, guys, this is not touching the heart of what I see going on. I see the ship virtually sinking and taking on water, and you guys are talking about when we're going to have the bridge game this afternoon. Anyway, what happened to me when I came into the church, and I came in through connections with friends in the Chesterton Society, a local book club, if you will. All of this was a grand gift from God. I had no idea. But it's a commonality with many people who discover Chesterton, who also discover a fellowship with the Chesterton Society. It's an amazing thing. And it's unlike most anything else. What I've loved about it for years, and even until now, it's never been a whole lot about, we need your money, we want to raise your money. It's about, we want to raise your spiritual life, your awareness. We started sort of as a literary society years ago, and morphed into a larger organization. And what happened, and this is the key, this is really important, if you take this away, sometime about 13 years ago, Dale Ahlquist, who is the president of society and the world's absolute academic authority on everything Chesterton, he's a very creative guy who doesn't usually think about why not do something. It's like, well, why don't we do this? He and a friend was over coffee talking. They were talking about the decline in the quality of education in this country, our high schools, even our Catholic high schools. And they were saying, we're losing our kids. Used to use them that first year of college when they went to the comparable world religions. That was designed to make us all atheists. But now we lose them in high school. So anyway, they said, well, what are we going to do? He said, well, I guess we could just start our own school. This was up in Hopkins, Minneapolis, the Twin Cities area. And I'm going to say 13 years ago, maybe 14. They started a high school, 4-year curriculum. They designed the curriculum, and it was a classic Catholic education. And they decided to call it the Chesterton Academy, which is now known as the Chesterton Schools Network. Now, the most amazing thing about this, I was up there about 5 years ago, and I took a tour of the high school while it was in session. I think there were probably about 200 students all there. 4 years of high school in progression. And I was absolutely flabbergasted at the quality of the education and the spirit of the place. Time doesn't permit me to tell you, but what I will say is this, and I mean it sincerely. I have a 4-year undergraduate degree, as many. And I said, these kids are getting in this 4 years of high school a superior education to what I got in a 4-year undergraduate degree in a private college, for that matter. And my education was in the 70s. Today, quite frankly, that stuff is just complete dross. The cost of education in the higher ed realm is doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and the quality has gone down to the floor. And a lot of folks know it, maybe others don't. So they created a school. Well, most fascinating thing. The kids, at first, they don't want to go. They don't like it. Oh, we might have to wear uniform. Oh, Catholic school. But what happens in a short time, they light up because they're actually being challenged with some of the greatest ideas and educational tools in the history of this planet. And they're learning how to think, and they're learning drama, and they're getting to read Socrates and talk a Socratic method, believe it or not. they gravitate to it. And it's sort of like saying, gee, I never knew there was such a thing as a fine New York strip steak with a great baked potato. All I ever had was hot dogs, and didn't know there was anything else. So the school began to transform lives. It did exactly what Dale had hoped that it would do. And the amazing part, the really blowout part, is out of the first few hundred graduates of that early school, it created 35 vocations. 35 vocations. So our diocese down here is lucky to come up with one or two a year, it seems. And
Mm.
it's an amazing, life-changing thing. And the stories of the students who come out of the program are amazing, life-changing stories. And all this is this Chestertonian spirit. So our book club literary society found itself in the education business. And what they were doing was creating a real, authentic Catholic education and doing it as affordably as possible. There's a lot of parental involvement. It's an amazing thing. Now, the fear I had was, can they recreate this? I mean, because what they did in Hopkins is an absolute living miracle. It's a beautiful thing. Um, but yes, they were able to start creating, quote unquote, kind of like, if you will, a franchise, school in a box. And very recently, last summer, I was in Milwaukee for the annual Chesterton conference. And I got to tour the Milwaukee Chesterton Academy, the high school there, which is about 4 years old. And I walked in the door and immediately I went, it's the same place. It's the same
Mm.
spirit. It's the same. This is awesome. It's the same cologne, like God walked through here. And you don't see God, but you can smell this cologne. He's been here. And I went, wow, they're recreating this. And can you believe there are now 45 startup Chesterton Academies all over the globe, most in the United States, but they're in some amazing places around the world. What is it doing? It's probably the single most powerful tool for fighting this attack on our youth, on our culture, and on our families. God uses small things in very, very big ways. And so I just was floored. And I began, not everybody should do this, I began donating some money because it helps the organization to function. They keep it very, very affordable, but as any nonprofit works, they could use some cash. And not too many moons ago, I bet it wasn't 2, 3 years ago, we came up with the idea of what was called the Knights. And as you know, knights are to fight a battle. And knights are to save the world and to save the church and save the kids, save us all. Knights, a beautiful concept. And of course, we know there are Knights of Columbus and so forth. Well, we now have the Knights of the Gilbert Keith Chesterton Society. And there are categories of ongoing support and, if you will, giving to the organization. And of course, I'm a knight. I'm a lifetime knight. I'm just a sucker for this. I just love this stuff. But what we came up with is that people want to do something that can make a difference. And they're hit 10,000 ways about give me your money, buy this book, buy this internet program, da da da, endless, endless, endless. And we said the Chesterton Society and the Chesterton Schools Network is never going to be about that. We're always going to be authentically this small time, bottoms up, very, very Catholic structure.
Mm-hmm.
You follow what I'm saying?
Oh,
And
yeah.
the spirit of localism. And what's that ever wonderful word, which I know well and can't say it, but the whole bottoms up concept of things Catholic.
Mm.
Um, subsidiarity, okay? And that
Mm-hmm.
manifest subsidiarity. So it's never going to be this high power, high tech organization with high powered marketing executives and so on. But the spirit of this is great because God's spirit is in it, and it is so powerful and is quite real. So someone can come along and say, all right, but I would like for them to draft my credit card, $100 a month, which is tax deductible. I can stop it at any time. But I now become a knight. I become a part of this fellowship. And when I get as a membership in the Literary Society, and I get the coolest magazine in the world, the Gilbert, which is published annually, and about what, eight, I don't know how they do it, 6, 8
I think it's
copies.
6 a year. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal magazine. And then if you ever go to one of the conferences and all of a sudden you go, oh, I have never been to any fellowship anywhere, not even at the most ronkin, hompin', wonderful Catholic fellowship, where people are as happy and as cheerful and as joyful and living as joyful knights fighting the battle against the madness, the insanity of this modern age. And it really is. If you don't see it as insane, you've got to open your eyes, you know.
Amen. And we are trying our very best to combat that at the society. Everyone who's involved, from our knights to our volunteers, to the people who work here, to the people who are on the board. I do want to mention too that we've just introduced a new level of nights, an entry level at $50 a month. Those are the St. Francis nights. And we, if you can give, please do. You can go to chesterton.org/knights. That's KNIGHTS. But I also want to acknowledge that we understand that success for us means something different than success in the corporate world. And of course, if you can give, please do give. And if you cannot, please send us your prayers. We could always use your prayers. And our knights are also, as Brent can attest, I'm sure, our knights pledge not only their physical support, but they also pledge to pray for us. And we're amazingly grateful for this army of prayer warriors that we have.
And we have a fellowship globally. And it's
Hmm.
an amazing thing. I don't know what it is about being a Chestertonian, but we know each other like old friends, you know.
Well, just I think part of it is that, and I think I've said this before, even maybe on the podcast. Chesterton is kind of the friend who introduced us. Like, would I ever have a chance to be friends with Brent Forrest? Would I ever even meet you? Probably not. Um, but we both are friends with Chesterton, so we have this mutual friendship that connects us.
You have no idea what a surprise all this is to me. What else I do like in being a convert? And Chesterton says, because a lot of people that are Chesterton converts are readers, they like philosophy and literature and so forth. And so he said that at the end of his conversion story, he says that a danger for us is intellectual pride, that we could slip into it.
Mm.
And I thought, boy, does that ever hit me between the eyes. Because I'm remembering a story of a man, a friend of mine, who was a down and outer. He had drug and alcohol problems. He was losing his, he would end up on the streets, bottom down. Okay, the man was terrible. And so he would kind of claw his way back. God, please help me out. And he'd finally get a job. And they'd interview him and say, oh, please, I'll sweep floors, I'll clean toilets. I just need a job. And he would be so happy to get that job. And that's kind of how we are sometimes when God forgives us of our sins and takes us into
Mm.
it. You know, and so this guy's telling the story on himself. He says, I'm in there a couple of weeks, couple of months, a month or two. Next thing I know, I'm starting to find all the things I don't like about this place and how they could run it better, how I could run it better than these people. And it's the greatest story about the chutzpah, and we do that. We do that as converts. But Chesterton says we can become very arrogant without realizing it. What I
Mm.
love about Chestertonian life is that it's funny. We laugh and we don't take ourselves too seriously. And we know, and Chesterton is not our Lord. We know who are
Hmm.
follow him. But this business of the nights, they have categories out all the way. You can do 250 a month, 500 a month, and so forth. And what is so helpful for the organization is this sustained flow of cash. And the other
Hmm.
thing is, don't beat on folks. We don't say you got to buy this, you got to do this. Here's more, here's more, here's more. But you become a part of this fellowship. You get the magazine and so forth. A dear friend of mine who just passed away this year, and many in the organization know Stuart Colner and his wife
Mm.
Barbara. Dr. Stuart Colner was retired, and he was an adult convert to the Catholic Church. And I met them, he and his wife, about 5 years ago at a conference in Colorado Springs. And immediately we had lunch. We just sat, random, sit down at a table to eat. And immediately I have these lifetime friends like I've always known them.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
close relationship. And so Stuart and I served on the board of directors with the apostolate. We were very involved in helping the schools network grow. And so when we started the nights, we were saying, well, let's see what levels we want to sign up at. Now, one of the really nice levels is called the White Horse. Okay.
Mm.
And so we said, well, we'll be White Horse Knights. And I said, yes, Stuart, which end of the horse? We
Uh,
we lost him to a heart
mm,
attack just months back suddenly, and tremendous loss. But in his name, I was given that
oh,
lifetime service award because I shouldn't talk about that because it's not that big a deal. But um,
mm,
I just staying on the course of this. What can I do? How do I fight this culture war? You can make a difference like nobody's business, and it's very on the ground and very, very powerful. Ask me another question, or maybe we ought to be wrapping up in a minute. I don't know. But
Well, I've got a question. I've got a question that I want to ask Brent. So you kind of you 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 talk very highly about being involved in the society. You talk about the good work that you're able to sort of help with. You were on the board, the people that you've met. But is there something in particular, like a highlight of being a part of the society, being a knight, like one moment, one sort of memorable, this was the best memory for me. I'd like to sort of dig that out of you, like something that you're just like, this has been the greatest thing that I have encountered, done, the person I met, the thing I did, you know, what is that for you since being an active part of the society?
Albert, what if I said there's about a half a dozen of those?
Well, let's take one off the top then.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the realization, what has really been amazing to me, is to be able to share this experience and this love. I grew up in South Florida, but I lived in Texas for many years. And when I sold my business 3 years ago, I moved back to Florida and I moved to Vero Beach, Florida. We have a lovely parish here, St. Helen's Catholic Church. Well, there's no Chesterton Society here, and most of the people at the church that I know, they've all heard of Chesterton, but they didn't know much. And some of the guys wanted a book club, and I said, "Well, I can help you start a book club, but let's make it a Chesterton Society. There's some advantages to that." And they said, "Okay, well, can we talk about C.S. Lewis?" I said, "Sure, we can talk about C.S. Lewis, but it's a Chesterton club. We'll start with some reading of Chesterton." That was 3 years ago, and this group has taken off. These folks they're just lit up. They're so happy. We have a fellowship, and they're calling themselves Chestertonians. Okay. And it's invigorating
mm,
their lives. It's like watching, it's like that old deal where we light everybody's candle off our candle. And I've been able to see that again and again. And anywhere you go in this country, say, I'm going to find where Chesterton Society is having a book club meeting this month in, Peoria, Illinois, or wherever it is. You go there and you meet the same spirit, the same people. And it's a God spirit. It's the spirit of God. And it's very, very Catholic. Chesterton is a rare and gifted genius. He's given us very, very much. And the Catholic Church in these ages is now beginning to discover what a treasure in the field he has always been. He is a magnificent treasure. And I, as a convert,
mm.
a guy coming from the outside who's clueless about even being Catholic, I get to help cradle Catholics learn more about their faith and light up about their faith because of this connection with Chesterton. So I would say that sounds like a pretty good answer, right?
I would say that sounds like a very, very good answer. I'll give you a rating on it later once I listen to it again.
Else. All right.
Well, we just want to thank you so much, Brent, for being on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I really hope that people who are listening can, if you've had these kind of experiences, that's so great. And if you haven't, go pick up some more Chesterton and get deeper involved. If you do feel the call to become a knight of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton, please remember to visit chesterton.org/knights. That's spelled KNIGHT, like the wonderful warriors from the Battle of Lepanto. Please consider joining us with your prayers, with your support. Help us to do the good work that we're doing right now. And again, thank you so much for joining me, Brent and Albert. It's been wonderful to have you both. And remember, Chesterton is always better with friends. Thank you.